All right, guys. Well, thanks for your attention so far. And as we close today, we're probably going to spend just a few minutes to allow you to interact with our speakers today. But before we even start that part, can you just tell them thank you again? And so for our speakers, is Bobby's going to be over here and I'm going to be over here, and we're going to just solicit the audience for some questions. And even though they may ask one of you a specific question, is what we would love to hear is not necessarily everybody has to answer every question, but because of where you are in life and what you've walked through in your leadership, if you've got something to add to that, please feel free to chime in. And so for those in the room, if you've got a question, raise your hand and Bobby and I will come over and we'll give you the microphone so that way it can be picked up. And I know we already have one right here. So here we go.
Hey, my name is John Green. This is a question for you, Dennis. When you talk about burnout and coming back from it, right? How do you protect yourself from getting to that point again? I know you went through it a couple times, but surely for a few years you protected yourself against it. But how did you also guard against I guess not realizing your full potential as well? Because, hard charging type A, for me, when I went through a burnout phase, I came back from it and thought, man, I'm really not doing everything I know I could do, but I need to kind of step back a little bit. So what is your advice on, some strategies to prevent it from happening again and also maximizing your full potential at the same time?
Well, I may not be the best of that because I had to go through it a couple times. But here was what I tell you. It was during after the first time I'd burned out, that's when I picked up a new hobby. That was running. And so for me, what I learned is I didn't have the balance. And so I had to go get out and get some hobbies. I had to do some things that diverted my attention. One of the big things to me was really reading the Bible. I was a casual reader, but I made it a point to where I was reading the Bible every day to hear what God's word for me. But then also just get out and get some hobbies. One of the things my counselor told me the first time was go out and stare at a tree. I thought that was the dumbest thing. But then I went and sat in a chair and I just studied this tree, and I just sat and watched this tree grow. And as you know, it doesn't grow very fast. But the point was it was getting yourself to a position to where you were relaxed and to take your mind off of that thing that was creating the anxiety.
That's good. Thanks, Dennis. Right over here, Bobby. Brian Altman's got a question.
Hi, guys. Hey, great job. Kevin, I got two questions. Kevin, first one's for you. And then for the rest of you, I've got a question for you that I'd like each of you to answer. So Kevin, with F3, you've got, all kinds of, men meeting everywhere, right? And so not just here in Katy, but all over Katy, all over. So how do you organize and move everybody in that same direction consistently? I know you talked about vision, but how do you really get it to where everybody's on the same page in all those multiple locations would be the first question for you. And then for all of you, besides the Bible, besides your faith in Christ, who do you surround yourselves, maybe one or two people for inspiration, mentorship? Who is important in your life, and how did you find them?
Awesome question. Absolutely a key challenge. One of the things that F3 does really well, and I certainly don't take credit for this, is the concept of a starfish organization. So what that means is most corporations, most organizations that exist, those are spider organizations. You have one head, lots of legs. What happens if you cut the one head off? Well, the spider quits moving, right? As opposed to a starfish organization, all the action takes place at the legs. If you cut the leg off of a starfish, it grows a new starfish. So the way that F3 manages it, the way that we manage it here in Katy, is we have that one mission, we have that one vision, that clear set of values that we believe in, and our standard, and then we very intentionally give the authority to the local leaders. All the guys that run our individual locations, they're called AOQs, Area of Operation Qs. Don't ask me where the Q come from. I don't think anybody knows, but it just means local leaders. And those guys don't have to check in. They don't have to ask for permission. They know what we're trying to do. They have the authority to go make decisions and run things. And that's what F3 has taken all over the nation and now the world. It's just simply, here's what we're about. Here's what we believe in, and this is the standards that matter. Now go do it.
My second question. Remind me of the question so I answer it helpfully.
Who do you surround yourself with mentorship or inspiration that's close to you, and how many do you have?
Sure. So, particularly, I have a guy who I would identify as my mentor. He's a stage ahead of me in life. So he's got a kid in college. He's got a kid in high school, a kid in junior high, a kid in elementary. And I sort of stumbled into that relationship. He was the pastor of the church that I attended for quite some time, and he really just pulled me in via a relationship. He wouldn't probably see himself as my mentor. He wouldn't identify himself that way. I treat him as such. Like what I gave to you really has come from his investment in me. Like my picture of a faithful man is him. And so he is the person that I would go to ask questions about professional questions in ministry, life questions, marital questions, kids questions. He's the guy that I emotionally dump to when I need to process, right? So that's just happened naturally. So that's a guy who's a stage ahead of me. And I also have a friend who is a peer. And it's not really a mentoring relationship. It's a peer type relationship where I'm honest with him, he's honest with me, and we live this Christian life together.
Probably the most significant mentor of my life, and I have to say, unlike my friend here, I'm having a hard time finding that person that's a whole season ahead of me, right? Because they just don't exist as much anymore. But I went to the half season. But I found, to me, I had to find somebody that I would be that I would want to listen to, that I respected a lot. So I found a man that was really plugged into a church I used to attend, and he led a lot of Bible studies. But also in the corporate world, he was he's a senior financial senior financial vice president for an investment banking firm. So I got to know him at different levels and came to find out that was somebody that I could really respect. About 10 years, plus or minus, 10 years older than me, so he had a lot more experiences than I did. But I think to find a mentor, they need to be somebody that's ahead of you in a season, perhaps, that you can really respect at different levels. And so I really expected his corporate experience. I really was impressed with how he had sold his life to Jesus and was teaching in the church. So to me, find out what's most important to you in a mentor, and then you go search based on who you think you could really respect.
My turn. So I think it's easy for me to not be the smartest person at the table. That happens every time, no matter what table I'm sitting at. So it's easy for me. But I find people that challenge me in my thinking. I'm a question person. I ask a lot of questions. And so I find people that are really willing to answer my questions. I'm not just saying this because he's my boss, but Brad's been that guy for me. Someone who's going to... One of the things I've noticed about him and another mentor when I was growing up was when I'd ask a question, they would never answer my question. They would always answer my question with a question. And so it drove me insane because every time I knew I asked my mentor when I was growing up a question, I was like, he's not going to answer it. He's going to make me answer it. But I appreciated that so much because it challenged my thinking. So I just try to find people that challenge me.
I have a very faithful mother, and so I've watched her for so many years just faithfully and quietly honor God with her life. And I have friends in this room. Missy is a very close friend, and we are the peer-to-peer mentor. We ask each other hard questions, and we're weirdly crazy together, but it's fun and it works. And my husband is a huge mentor of mine, and when I got over trying to be competitive with him or trying to keep him in line, I realized that he was actually my biggest cheerleader, and I'm always so thankful for how he pours into my life.
So this could be for everybody, but I'm thinking Cade and Kevin more so on the faithfulness and long obedience in the same direction, and then the ability to know who you are and say no to the things that aren't your mission. Can you talk about a time where maybe that you've had to die to some things that you really wanted to do to remain faithful to what God has called you to do, and the perceived loss of what you had to die to and maybe the outcomes of it, and the long-term benefit of making those hard decisions?
I guess so. I'm trying to do this on the spot. The first thing that comes into my head is personal. So one of the things that I have to die to is my own desires, right? So here, this is the Christian life. Our desires are at war in us. And one of the ways that we remain faithful is I have to die to certain desires. So let's just, here's an example. I limit my access and really pull really far back on my access to social media. Here's why. Because my heart will feast on the attention that I gain from social media. And so I have to, a part of faithfulness for me, this long obedience in the same direction, is dying to that desire for people to see me and notice me and make Cade famous. I have to eliminate that. It's one of the ways that I remain faithful.
So I'll answer it in two parts. The first one, personally, something I had to go through, which I believe was sanctification. My son was born in 2011. I would love to say that I started out life crushing it as a husband and father. I would love to say that I've been killing it since day one. That would be a blatant lie. I started off very selfish, really identified with what Dennis said about how his upbringing kind of formed his desires. My upbringing formed desires of a different kind of things that I was going to go do, hobbies I was going to have, adventures I was going to take. And I carried that into my marriage so that early on I was still thinking about these adventures that I was going to have. I wasn't thinking about the responsibilities I had as a husband and as a father. And so I had to largely die to myself in terms of those things that I thought were so important. I had to realize that my pursuit of the Lord and my responsibility for my family were so far above any of those hobbies or those adventures or even the notoriety that was going to come from doing those things, and just really put the perspectives in the right place. And I would also say that the previous question of peer mentorship helped with that. I had men around me who were like, hey man, maybe you should think about how much you're gone, how much you're choosing yourself over your family. And then to put it in the F3 context, so every organization, every team has bandwidth. You have finite bandwidth as a team, right? And you can either spend all that bandwidth doing 2 really big things or 30 small things, right? But the total bandwidth is the same. And so as a leader, you have to make the hard calls to say, these 2 things are what really matter. Maybe it's 5 things, maybe it's 20, I don't know. But you have to say, these are the things that really matter. And then you have to look people straight in the face and say, this idea you had, I'm not saying it's not great. I'm not saying it's not a terrific cause or an incredible opportunity, but it's not right for us right now, right? And so we've had to do that several times over the last 4 to 5 years. What I would say looking back is those people, if their hearts are in the right place, they receive that and then they lean in onto the things that matter and they become the engines that move you toward the big things. So, yeah.
And to answer the second part of your question about what was the cost of that, let's just talk about the scenario that I mentioned regarding social media. So here's what I miss out on, is I miss out on building a platform, right? Because let's just be honest about it. It is a place to build a platform. It's a place to be known. It's a place for people to receive content from you. It's a place where you can really make your influence significant. But I have to ask myself a question. Am I going to measure success by the influence that I gain on a social media platform? Am I going to measure my success on my faithfulness to God? Because if I build this platform over here, this is for me, I'm not saying this is a scenario for everybody, but if I try to build this platform over here, my heart's gonna feast on that attention. And I'll forfeit faithfulness to God for the sake of a platform, when right here, I can abandon that, and faithfulness to God is way better long-term than whatever platform I might afford myself on social media.
One thing maybe I'd like to add to that, I can't answer all that question because Ryan and I work together, and so he knows that we always have this ongoing debate about what we should go down and what paths we should not go down, which is an interesting debate. And it does take the peer-to-peer discussions on trying to keep your ministry in your lane so you don't try to become all things to all people where you're a mile wide and inch deep. But on the die to self part, part of my story when I was telling you before, I wanted you to hear how good I thought I was, because I wanted you to get a sense for how far I had to fall and how hard that was to fall before I could finally figure it out. And I had to go through it a couple times. But I will tell you, for me personally, every day now, and I never did this before, but every day now, I wake up and the first thing I do in the morning is I pray. And as part of my prayer, I make sure there's two things in it. One, that I want God to know that I completely surrender to him today and that I die to myself today. And I had to do that because that was the only way that I would carry that throughout the day with me, to remember all throughout the day when we're getting hit on by just the ways of this world and either whether it's political or racial, just all the tensions of the world that you'll get yourself wrapped up in if you're not careful. The only way I could survive a day now and not get wrapped up on all that is, for me, I had to wake up every morning and do those two things.
That's so good. I know there's a couple more questions. We're going to get to those. I actually want to ask a personal question. Is as a fan of leadership, I'm constantly evaluating other leaders, and I'm always I have a curiosity on their habits, right? What makes you tick? What is it that you do that sharpens your skills in whatever area that you're in? And so I'll just ask from right to left. Megan, I'll start with you to go down. Is tell the group, right, some practical one or two things that you use to grow as a leader, right? And maybe it could be physically. Kay told me he's about to run a marathon. It could be something like that. Maybe it's getting up early in the morning, staying up late. It's reading. It's this. Give us something that we can write down and say, you know what? Here's something that we could possibly put in our tool bag to sharpen our skills.
I think I've realized, or I've had to realize that, and get over myself that I don't know it all, and it's okay to ask questions. And so I've gotten better at just asking many people questions. And I do that a lot with our staff and the people that are in my life, particularly here at Kingsland. And just asking questions of how people do things and what drives them, what makes them excited about what they're doing. And so I just try to learn from other people. And I am a weird, geeky, I love going to all the conferences. And I take all the notes. And so I literally will just sit and listen and take notes and read over my notes and just absorb those things. And so I don't think you have to be a geek about it, but there is something to just learning from others.
From when my kids were younger, my kids are older now, but when my kids were younger, I started the habit of like waking up way early, like 4:30 or 5, because it was the only time our house was quiet. And this is when I could still hear. It was the only time that, like that early in the morning, Amy and I, my wife, we wouldn't even talk that much because it was so early. She was getting ready. It didn't take me very long to do my hair, so that was quick. So I would really spend a lot of time reading, and I found that it just helped me a ton. The other thing that gets me going is once I realized who God had created me to be instead of who I wanted to be. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be a leader. And I'm not a lion personality. My wife is the lion. I'm not an alpha male. I know most people in this room can take me. I'm okay with that. God has built me to encourage people. So a lot of times there's probably people in this room, it'll be 5 a.m. before I read, I try to find 3 random people that I was on my contacts list to encourage, because I know that that's the way God's built me. And so that gets me going, as if I can be doing what God has created me to do. So I try to be intentional about that every single day. And it just gets me started off right every day.
So when I left the corporate world about 6 years ago, I started walking the streets around Houston with guys like Ryan Orban, and I felt like I knew all the answers in the corporate world. And so I tried to take all that corporate experience and bring it into the ministry world. It didn't translate very well. So I had this head knowledge of the Bible, but I still just didn't know how to minister to people. And so to me, to answer Brad's question, it was really being intentional on reading the Bible, But I read it in a different way because here's why. I was out walking the streets with these guys, and I'm meeting people that I'm not supposed to be having conversations with, talking about things that I don't have anything to tell them. And I started realizing that I was out in situations that Jesus was speaking to in the Bible. Okay, so the healing of the invalid at Bethesda. I ended up having that conversation with that guy on the streets of Bissonnette one night. And on a side street in Fulham Park, I had a conversation one night with the woman at the well. And I didn't realize it till I had those conversations. And so I went back and I started reading those stories. I've read John chapter 5 probably 25 times now, and the woman at the well story probably a dozen times. So my point is, when I got out there, I realized I wasn't equipped. So I started reading the Bible from a different perspective because the scripture started coming alive when I got out and I was serving in communities and being intentional about trying to lead others to Jesus. And so to me, the Bible is such a greater reference than I even knew it to be beforehand. Because when I had those conversations, I realized I really wasn't equipped to tell this guy. I'm trying to tell him corporate stuff, Hey, what's your vision? What's your mission? What's your strategy? Didn't make any sense. But when I started reading the scriptures in a whole new light on how am I going to reach that guy the next time, man, the Bible came alive in a whole different way. I'll tell you, it's just exciting to read those stories.
So one of my personal life quotes, and I don't know who to attribute it to, is leaders are learners. It's that simple. Leaders are learners. And so I try to be curious. I think to be a good learner, you have to leave yourself open to new ideas. You got to be curious about new topics. I also think you have to embrace a feedback loop, which is not always comfortable. And that feedback loop is checking your own biases, checking your own assumptions. What are you operating under today that's maybe keeping you from learning new things? So it's a common theme with what the others have said. I also think that we're blessed to live in an age where information is so accessible, right? Internet's a powerful tool. Podcasts are an amazing medium to learn and grow. There's still these things called books. Those are cool if you have the time. But we have so much amazing learning subject matter, intelligent people. We have access to that content. It's just a matter of being curious and dedicated to continuing to learn.
I'm not thinking that it's sharpening me as a leader in the moments, but Brad helped me think about it. It keeps me healthy as a leader, and maybe that's one of the best things you can do to sharpen yourself as a leader is, so I do some form of fitness moderately, regularly, and that keeps me sane is part of that. It's mindless as it goes, Additionally, I enjoy, my mentor has said it like this, I enjoy doing stuff where you see instant results. So I really like to mow the grass. And I was like, that's real weird, man. But here's what my mentor says. We work so often in the unseen. It is nice to work in the things that are seen. And finally, I'm a part of a small group of people where I'm not Cade the leader, I'm just Cade. I don't show, right? So whoever said it, leaders lead, it's what we do. But I don't show up to that space to be in charge, I show up to that space to be one of them.
My name is Russell Robbins. And for Cade, with your comment in regarding that faithfulness is the number one true measure of success, I believe you said earlier. How much do you, and then obviously all y'all, reflect on your previous times of adversity that help you through your future struggles? Years ago, I had the privilege of hearing Fred Luter preach, and his sermon was based on test of faith. And so, in a current time of struggle for myself, I've seen the previous struggles and how they've shaped me to endure and keep faithful during this time. And so I was checking to see on how much y'all reflect on those times in the past and how they help you in the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I don't have a practice of reflecting on things gone by. However, certainly it's true that the adversity that we face has formed us for the task that we're facing in the present. I mean, that's just the reality. That's the grace of God toward us. That God is not wasting your adversity, or in maybe said another way, God is not wasting your pain. It's God's grace toward us. I think about it particularly in my scenario with my parents' divorce when I was 18. I'm 32 now. That certainly shaped me, and what's more than that, benefited me in my leadership. I minister to teenagers. What percentage of the teenagers that sit in front of me come from a split home? What percentage of the teenagers in front of me struggle with the idea of what it means to have a good father? Probably a fair amount. And so God is not wasting that pain. He's using it right in front of me.
Yeah, I think he uses our pain, and what I love is I've been reading through, I started at the very beginning in Genesis and been reading through the Old Testament, and you see over and over again where God reminds the Israelites of his faithfulness, and he has to keep reminding them. And so I think that we have to keep reminding ourselves, or allow God to keep reminding our hearts of where he's shown up in our lives and where he's been faithful and the redemption of that. And when you can come to a freedom from the shame of things that have maybe happened to you or that you've done, when you come to a freedom, it's beautiful to see the redemption of what he does in your life and then how he uses that for future ministry and for his future glory.
I was going to say that I think what helped with adversity was when I began to realize the seriousness of that. The enemy is coming to steal, kill, and destroy, not just to frustrate us. He didn't come just to make things hard, but through Jesus, all things are redeemable. And so through our adversity, again, the enemy's not coming just to try to upset your business, that he wants to take you out. He wants to take your family out. But that if we will allow Jesus, he can say, this is a terrible, ugly situation, and I want to make something beautiful out of it. And so that just, when I look at my life, when I think about being deaf, and I was doing treatments down at MD Anderson, and you hate to look at other people and say, well, at least I'm not like that, but you're seeing people fight for their lives. It's just put in perspective that I'm blessed. There's worse things in the world than what I'm going through, and I totally believe that God's going to redeem this and has.
That's good. One more question over here.
Okay, my question's for Kevin. Kevin, you talked about critical elements of organizational growth, and you talked a lot about metrics and measures and tools, but your ministry is a very passionate ministry. It's reaching men who may be unbelievers, so leaders that you recruit probably are driven by passion, which a lot of those people don't always feel the need to use tools and measuring metrics. They think that takes a lot of it out of it, right? So how do you keep your leaders having that passion while also helping them understand that metrics are important, even if it's the one person, right, that comes to the church after a year? How do you keep your leaders keeping the passion, but also recognizing the importance of metrics?
Such a good question. You sure you weren't sitting in our last meeting that we had a couple months ago? Because this came up directly. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge. What I would say is it starts with your leaders fully buying in to the goal of what you're trying to do, right? And for us, it's about positively impacting our communities. One of the most impactful realizations that I think our group had is that F3 Katy will never be started again. 50 years from now, F3 Katy will be operating off the foundation that you guys are building today. Your children will benefit from the community impact that you are having today. That's how big this thing is. So after they buy into that, then it comes down to what are the things we need to do. And to me, you got to make it clear, we don't really care about the numbers for the numbers' sake. We care because the numbers help us to see how we're doing, against the goal we're trying to meet. And so it's almost like You have to respect the process even if you don't like the process, right? And for our guys, you are exactly right. They're passion-led, and that's what makes them such great leaders day in and day out. And that's what allows them to reach and recruit men and help them on this path. So whether they're analytical or not, they recognize, hey, I need to take 1 minute, 3 days a week and jot down these key figures and understand that these are going to be used to paint the picture of the impact we're having. Because ultimately, passion is not a constant. Passion ebbs and flows. And when the passion of your organization dips down, that's where it's really helpful to look back and say, guys, I know your tank is low, but look at what you've done over the past 3 years. And if you don't have the metrics, you can't look at what you've done.
I love it. So guys, the last question is, this morning we've came here and we've came to listen, to learn, so we can be better leaders. I mean, the words up there on the screen talk about leadership, encouragement, answers, and discipleship. But the backdrop to all of this is the logo behind you, which is a home. Right? And the things that I know about each one of you on the stage is, yes, you come from diverse backgrounds with different experiences and different even family experiences that you've mentioned. But just for a moment, what I know from you is one of the most prized roles that you enjoy is either a husband, a wife, or a father or mother. Right? Dennis talked about having those priorities in line. So I want to end with a practical tip from you to us. So for the guys on stage, I'm going to ask you, give the guys in the room, give us 1 or 2 marriage advice to be a better husband or a father. For Megan, for the women in the room, give them advice how to be a better wife or a mom. Dennis, we'll start with you. Just, you have but by the color of your hair, you have a little more experience than the rest of us. So talk to the guys just for a moment, how to be a better dad, better father. Yeah. Just looking for some quick bullets that they can jot down. Then we'll go through the guys and then Megan at the end.
All right, so one tip I'll give that worked really well for me, and just by the grace of God that I happened into that, is, you know, we all have teenagers at some point that grew up, and those teenage years can be very difficult. And I will boast on my kids that I didn't have a troubled teen in the house. And what I think that was a result of, besides God, was that the one thing that was really important to that kid of mine, I made it my priority. For my oldest daughter, she loved volleyball. I bought a net every night until way past dark. We were out in the backyard hitting volleyball together. My son enjoyed weightlifting. I didn't really care to weightlift because it was hurting my joints, but every night we went and worked out together. And so whatever that priority was for my kid, whatever that one thing or one hobby that they really liked, I made it my highest priority, and I spent so much time with them and made it my priority. And that just kept our relationship so tight, I think, to those formidable years, that nothing was able to separate us. And I just thank God for that. So that's a tip. Make your kids' priority your priority. Oh, from a husband's perspective, I just got through reading the book Love and Respect. Great book if you've never read it. I've learned now, when my wife tells me before I leave the house, anytime I go, she tells me she loves me 3 times. And in my inside, it's like, why do you keep telling me this? But I read that book. And so guess what? I tell her 4 times before I leave the house now that I love her. And so reading a book like that just let me understand how true it is that women love to be loved and men love to be respected. And so I've learned to figure out what's important to my wife as well and fulfill her through those things, knowing that she's going to respect me back.
I'll probably win the award for least creative answer. Mine is super simple, and I heard it, I think the first time Greg Mott said it, but I've heard this church repeat it over and over again, and that's the more you talk, the more you talk. Super simple. So for my wife, my tactical tip is lunch dates. You know, so busy jobs, busy pursuits, even if they're not jobs, you know, places we spend our time. By the end of the day, once you get the kitchen clean and the kids in bed, you're out of gas. It's just the truth. And talking doesn't sound fun. But if you go meet at 11:30 or noon on a random Tuesday, all of a sudden you're this vibrant conversation with your spouse and you actually have fun and talk about the stuff. Even if you don't, to give credit to Mr. Todd Pendergrass, start the conversation with something simple. Where do you want to go right now? Or what is your favorite color today? You know, and all of a sudden this conversation starts from that little bitty seed and you're connecting and you start talking about fun stuff and then you talk about the serious stuff, but you're not doing it from a point of at a gas. So that's the marriage tip. Kids are the same way. I've actually heard Brad talk about this. So I went to work for a startup a year ago. Our hours are long. A lot of times I'm getting home at 7 o'clock, maybe making it in time for dinner. But when I put my kids down, I just try to take 5 minutes and say, hey, you know, what happened today? What's going on? Is there anything you're confused about? Did you hear any words you don't know? And 90% of the time, oh, it's good. Oh, nothing. Oh, it's fine. You know, but every now and then there'll be that one little thing where they open up and we have a conversation. And my hope is, and what people that are wiser than me have said, is that's laying a foundation for when there are really big things.
I don't know if you remember the picture of me with really puffy eyes. Some marriage advice is do what you're told the first time. Like when Meg was, yes, that. It was after an argument that I lost. Like Meg was talking about when she was talking about competition, I think once I began to realize with Amy that, you know, when you're dating, there's all these things that you find cute about each other, and then you're married for a while, and you're like, wow, that's not cute anymore. That's really annoying. And but then finding all those things that made me so upset and mad, all of those things making me a better person. All the things that I'm not. Like I said, she's a lion personality. She tells me all the time, I'm not going to feel sorry for you. I'm not your mama. And so, you know, those things, I want someone to feel sorry for me. But she's great at all the things that I'm not, and she pushes me to be a better person. And once I started to realize that, like, okay, God set this marriage up intentionally. It wasn't competition. We're not fighting about that. Like, anyway, the other thing with parenting is, so my son is 17 and my daughter is 19. And I used to take parenting as like we were detectives trying to catch them doing something they shouldn't. And I read a book, and the guy who wrote it was at a retreat, and his roommate was the dad of two of the members from Switchfoot. And there's two grown men now that were making a difference in the world. And he asked him, he's like, what did you do right as a parent? And the father was like, we went surfing a lot. And he said, I did tell my kids, I told my boys, they may get in trouble for something, but I will never judge them. And so I've tried to take that approach with our kids, that I'm not here to try to catch them. I'm here to help. And so I don't want them to feel like when they come to talk to me about something that I'm going to be judged and they're going to be in trouble. Like, I legitimately love you, and I'm not worried about performance. I care about your heart, and I want to help. And so it just kind of took like whether they're going to be grounded or whatever to a different place where like, what's actually going to help instead of hurt?
Well, my husband and I were teammates. And when I finally learned to operate that way, even when we were arguing or having a heated discussion, he's always good about saying, but I'm still on your team. I'm your teammate. And so just remembering that always. And then also as a parent, I found one of the most powerful things is literally admitting that I have weakness to my kids. And I apologize to them a lot. And I tell them, I'm so sorry for this, what I said or how I said it. And Riley, our 5-year-old, she actually said to me one day, Mommy, you need to work on not yelling so loud at me. And I said, I'm very sorry. I will work on that. And she goes, okay, and I will work on telling the truth. And I was like, great. But our kids want honesty. They want us to be honest. And admitting our weakness, like I said earlier, it also helps our kids understand that we have a need for Jesus. And that as parents, we don't know what we're doing. We literally don't know what we're doing. And so it's okay for our kids to understand that and know that. That's powerful for them.
I'll give you 3 things that I got from 2 different men, one of which was my mentor. My wife had some people in my life write letters to me on my 30th birthday, and he wrote me a letter, and he wrote down a handful of things. It was almost proverbial. I mean, this dude, he's like the man. 2 things from him. 1, ministry is a calling, but sometimes you need to send it to voicemail. So whether you are in ministry or leadership, it's a calling, but sometimes you need to send it to voicemail. He said, a good woman will make you strong in back and weak in the knees all at the same time. And he said, she will love you then, so you love her now. The 3rd thing, I have 2 boys. They're 4 and 3. Their favorite thing in life is to get on the trampoline and wrestle. On my best days, I can remember, get on the trampoline and wrestle. Your ministry can wait. Your boys they won't care how big your ministry was. They won't care how cool you were. They will care, did Dad take the time to enter into my world and love me and fill my tank? So on my best days, I can come home and drop the stuff and get on the trampoline and wrestle, because those boys are going to be shaped by that, not by my influence as a leader.
Wow. So good. Thank you. Give it up for our speakers, man.